Welcome, everybody. It's nice to virtually meet you and say hi. My name is Professor Ben Allen, and I'm a visiting professor at the University of Surrey in relation to the 5G, 6G Innovation Centre. I also run my own company, Beta Alpha, where I am director and principal innovator, and currently doing some work for Oxford University developing some secure communications technology. I have worked and also do work in the satellite communications industry. I've worked on about 700 satellites which are in space today, and hosting, chairing this event, and will immediately hand to Freddie. You've made your introduction. Do you want to make another one and then pass on?
No, I think I've covered it. We can pass on straight over to Ed.
Cool. Thanks, Freddie. Thanks, Ben. So I'm Ed Bond. I head of School of Computing Engineering and Creative Industries at the University of Bedfordshire. I'm also director of the Luton AI initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the beginning of my presentation. Okay, just bear with me, everybody, while I just click through. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Excellent. So as I said, I'm Dr. Ed Bronze, a head of School of Computing Engineering and Creative Industries. My background is quite divergent. I always like to open these talks by saying when I was growing up, I used to say that I wanted to be a mad scientist. And I think that I fulfilled that requirement quite nicely because my area of specialism is computational intelligence and looking at new types of computers. And I spent quite a long time building artificial brains out of biological substrates and things like that. So I have a bit of a weird and wacky background. And today I'm gonna give you a bit of an overview of AI in relation to small businesses. I understand there's probably a wide group of industries represented in the audience today. And I'm hoping that I'm going to touch on a few aspects of how AI might be. I'll touch on several different aspects of artificial intelligence and the benefits for small businesses. And hopefully some of the things I'll talk about today will stimulate a nice and productive discussion after the presentation. I'll try and talk for between 15 and 20 minutes. So to give a summary of where I'm coming at here and the expertise background I'm talking from. So about 2 years ago, me and my colleagues at the University of Bedfordshire were having a bit of a laugh actually around this kind of big AI boom that we're facing at the moment. And we were talking about how the idea around language models and large language models, these concepts have been around for a long time. But one of the big things that happened is obviously we've got compute power and everything else. But the main thing is people started putting interfaces on the technology to enable people to start using it. And at that point, we thought, we are academics, we're developing these types of technologies, but we were really keen to be the organization that was the interface to create a mechanism to support our national and international community in leveraging cutting edge AI systems to support them in solving their challenges or innovating within their organizations. So that's where we created Luton AI. It's basically designed to build an ecosystem that drives business and technology innovation to create highly skilled jobs, to foster a collaborative network of AI adopters. And we support a broad range of different activities from implementing new products for companies that they can go and commercialize through to skills training, security development, policy development. And since we launched it, we've exploded. We've actually engaged now over 500 organizations, some of them internationally. We've worked on over the last 2025, we've worked on over 60 AI projects in relation to different uses of AI and adoptions of AI. We've held a large amount of events, just like the event that we're holding today, and skills delivery events. And we've also incubated 5 companies in starting up, and that's something that we're really keen to continue to support. And when I say incubated, some of them from the ground up, and some of them companies that were established but have needed support in taking AI products to markets and things like that. Just a quick example of some of the organizations we've worked for, just to give you a bit of an introduction there. So from large companies, international companies like Wizz Air, through to smaller local organizations like DBFB up in Northampton, Ambrit in Dunstable, Active Luton, Switch Shop, Geltech Systems, and actually the regional police force and regional healthcare as well. So we've worked across a wide range of different sectors, and we're really proud that we're bringing a whole range of different experiences and understandings of different sectors to the projects that we're working on. Now, that's kind of it from a bit of a background piece. What I would like to focus on a little bit now is on AI. Okay, so you're all going to have different understandings, and I'm hoping that I've got your patience to kind of do something that's a little bit provocative, if you like. So I like to start my sessions by saying, let's do a survey to gauge everyone's understanding in the room. However, today I've been a little bit lazy and I forgot to do the survey. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do the survey. I'm just going to reshare my desktop here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to redo my survey. I'm using some tools that we're all quite familiar with. So hopefully you can all see that. So this is ChatGPT. We're all used to it. So I'm going to say, I'm giving a talk today on unlocking the power of AI for small businesses. Let's do a show of hands survey to set the scene. So I'm just going to quickly generate some questions because again, I'm quite lazy. So let's start here. Hopefully at the bottom of your Zoom interface, you'll be able to raise your virtual hand. So for the first question, how many of you in the room are already using some sort of or some form of AI in your business today, whether you call it AI or not? So I'm having a look here to see if anyone's raising their hands. We've got some virtual hands there. Okay. Now this is actually a bit of a boring way to interface with you as an audience as I'm giving a talk. So why don't I, and also there's no context to these questions to help you answer them. So why don't I take these and say, you know what, I'm going to generate a slide deck using a tool called Gamma, and I'm going to do this to make it look a bit more jazzy, and potentially use another large language model that's in here, another AI tool, to generate some stats to set the scene. So let's quickly do that. So it's, as you can see, I've pasted in the questions it's generated, and it's given me a few extra things, and it's going to generate a nice slide deck for me. Isn't that nice and snazzy there? Cool. Oh, and we got lots of stats, which always help. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It's also generating me some nice pictures. So you know what, let's do that in presentation mode. Is AI right for your small business? And it's giving me a bit of context behind. Feeling unsure where to start with, where to start or what adds real value? You're not alone. Many small business owners recognize AI's potential, but struggle to identify practical applications that deliver genuine results. So is AI right for your small business? Show of hands again. Anybody feel that it is definitely right and something they need to do? If you found that button at the bottom. Cool. I can see a few people have done that. Excellent. Most people, which is probably a good thing given the nature of today's talk. Now, these again, you know what? I'm a computer scientist, and when I studied computer science as a student, one of my lecturers told me a bit of advice that I carry that I've taken very literally and carry with me, and told me that a good computer scientist is a lazy computer scientist. So what I'm actually going to do is take some of those questions. And, you know, I don't want to use my voice because I'm lazy, and I'm going to generate a little, let's go project. I'm going to generate a new avatar that's going to speak this for me because I'm lazy. Just bear with me. I'll have to download that and copy it in. And then, so now I'm going to, hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
How many of you worry that competitors who adopt AI faster than you will be able to operate more cheaply, quickly, or intelligently? Pause the video, Ed.
Could we have a show of hands for that one? It's interesting. Less people, a few people. Henry, put your hand up. Okay, and then the final question.
Here is the final question. How many of you would like to leave today with at least one practical AI idea you could pilot in your business within the next 30 days?
Okay, now the pressure's on. So the avatar, the AI avatar, has now committed me to delivering something which I need to be able to deliver. So that was a very, very simple, in some ways, silly tool, silly session. Hopefully you can all see those slides again there. That just shows I can do quite a lot now with not in a very short space of time using the AI tools that are available. So they're very powerful in the right hands, and with the right training, you can do a lot with them. Is the takeaway from that? So let's talk a little bit about what AI is. It's something I get asked quite a lot. So artificial intelligence can be broken down into three things really, which is data, models, and computing power. And a lot of the AI tools we actually use, the fundamental mathematics behind them, we've actually known about for quite a long time. But now we've got larger data sets and we've got models that we can build on those larger data sets because we have more compute power to build those models, which is enabling some of the tools that we're using en masse today. What I like to say, though, is that today's AI is quite narrow. It excels at very specific tasks, but it's quite brittle if you take it out of those tasks that it's been trained on. So it's quite important, I think, to take some of the news and media activity that you're seeing around AI and how it might cause this kind of dystopia with a pinch of salt. And always remember that at the moment, the AI tools that we're developing are good at very specific tasks. But if you take them out of those domain and put them into unknown and unfamiliar environments, the performance of them aren't quite as good. So just to summarize that, today's AI is really powerful at specific tasks. It requires quite a lot of data and oversight. It's brittle outside trained domains, as I said. It needs human validation really to be used productively and meaningfully, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It's available right now for you all to use and benefit from. This idea of artificial general intelligence is a bit more science fiction. There's lots of agentic systems that we're working on at the moment and things that can achieve higher levels of autonomy in tasks. But it's important to remember that a general human level of intelligence we're quite far away from that. The artificial intelligence systems we have at the moment, they struggle to self-improve. They're not autonomous. They can't adapt. And we've got and independent decision making can be quite a challenge. So getting to the point of AGI, we're quite far away from that at the moment, but we do have a lot of powerful tools that can do things that are quite significant and give us advantage in our daily lives. Very brief overview of where we are with AI and how we've got here to set the context. AI is actually not a new term or a new idea. In the 1950s and 1980s, we actually had a lot of ideas about artificial intelligence, very, very much focused on the abilities of machines. How can these calculating machines do things that were very much looking at what machines were good at, which is being very powerful calculators, which we had humans doing these types of tasks before, and computers could do this much faster. So rules and logic-based systems were what in the 1950s onwards we were looking at. We had some AI winters after it was initially pitched, which means that there was less investment, less desire to work in that area. And then in the 1990s, we started to see the tools being picked up again and investment starting to come from industry and from governments to look at using these tools. And this aligned with the development of computing technology and compute power. And in the 1990s to 2010, we started to see systems that would do fraud detection, credit scoring. So we could start training systems to not just do calculations for us, but help make predictions or analyze risk for us based on models that we would have developed. And then, of course, we're now in a moment where we're looking at large language models. And this is the boom that we're really focusing on at the moment. A lot of the society's interest in AI has come from language models. And for the first time, in the large language model movement, which while the technology's been developed for a while, really happened in 2018 onwards, we started to see machines that were being trained on massive amounts of texts, on websites, on conversations, for books, that then could be used to extract information from documents, that could write things, that could do things that were actually human-related traits. And this is what ChatGPT is, or what Copilot is, or what Google Gemini is. And the large language model has been so significant in the development of AI. because it really does relate to human traits more than some of the other developments that we've been seeing. So, modern AI can write reports, can read policies and interpret them through these large language models that we're seeing, can generate instructions for people to do tasks. So they're very, very powerful tools that are good at doing something that we think is an intrinsic human ability. And why is this so significant? So ChatGPT as a tool took 5 days to get to 1 million users. And to put that into context against some of the other significant platforms that have had an impact, you can see that we have Netflix, Kickstarter, Airbnb, Twitter, Spotify, Instagram down there. Instagram closest was 2.5 months to get to that 1 million usership, and ChatGPT did it in just 5 days, which is showing the society's movement towards engaging and using these types of platforms. Very quick summary of what a large language model is. It's a system, as I said before, trained on massive amounts of text. It learns so it learns language. It can learn some facts. It can make decisions based on what it knows effectively. It doesn't think like a human. It's really important to not see it as an entity that's thinking like a human. It doesn't understand context in the same way and have lived experiences in the same way. It predicts what's likely to happen next in a given sentence based on the context of what it knows. And this is really helpful for when you're asking it to write things for emailing or for reports, even to write computer code, to explain something. But if you're expecting it to do things that can relate to a human level performance, it's not going to perform quite as well in all of those tasks. So, and why these have become possible more recently is because we have access to mass amounts of data. We have access now to much more high-powered computers. And quite importantly, a new type of model has been developed over recent years, which is called transformers. Now, if you're a nerdy computer scientist like me, this is like, something that I do my bedtime reading on. But transformers are a new type of neural network that helps understand long-range context. So, if you think you're writing some instructions or you're trying to write some marketing, what a transformer does is enables something to be written to have structure based on a wide amount of context that you've given it. It's still probabilistic, though. That's quite important. While it might seem, random and creative, it's still probabilistic in nature, and you'll see some of those traits in some of the tools that you may be using. And a very quick summary before we get on to some of the benefits and opportunities of AI and some of the pitfalls as well. This is from one of the OpenAI reports, and it shows you where and what tasks people are starting to use ChatGPT in the first 90 days of them adopting it. So, for example, writing text and generation, as you can expect, and these are the areas the sectors that are using it. You can see they're quite high. Factual how-to, some instructions on how to do things, computer programming, media generation analysis. So you can see there's a list here of where the obvious use cases are coming from within organizations. But a key point of understanding is that neural networks are extraordinarily good at predicting what will happen next in data, but fundamentally they're incapable of knowing why it happens. And that's something that I think is always good to hold on to. Now, I'm going to focus for the last couple of minutes on a few things to consider, and then some of the opportunities for organizations like yourselves and how you adopt AI in your journeys. So in terms of considerations, one of the big things we have to understand is that a lot of the models that we're using today are built on vast amounts of data. Now, in the West, we've done much better with things like biases and things like that. But what we need to have an understanding of is these data sets span years and have old aged materials in them, and those biases are going to come to the fore if we're training our models on them. And just to give you a very silly example here, I asked Sora, the latest version of Sora from OpenAI, to generate me some marketing videos for my courses at the university. And this is what it came up with. And you can see here that we've got very stereotypical nursing women, primary education women, English is more balanced. My wife liked to point that out because she's a professor of English literature at Surrey. So she pointed out that English is the best subject there and the most balanced. But you'll see engineering, you've got a person of color with a hat on, and then computer science and someone of Asian background. So you can see these biases starting to play out. And of course, if we're using these models to do things for us, we need to make sure that they represent our values and they're useful. So something to consider there in the material it generates. So let's focus the last minute or so on opportunities for SMEs. Now, there are I've talked quite a bit about large language models because that's kind of been the inception of the AI boom. There are a lot of different types of AI tools that are available today. So large language models we talked about quite a lot, and a lot of people are associating AI with large language models, but it's actually a small subset of the tools that are available. So large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and so on, can generate text, conversational AI. But computer vision is another area. Detecting objects is deployed on quite a lot of CCTV camera systems now. Image and video generation, as we just saw. Voice speech processing, another AI tool with your Siris and Alexas. More task automation and workflow automation, people using it to automate the summary of data perhaps, and then automate repetitive tasks that you would be doing. And predictive analytics, can you use artificial intelligence tools to predict how much stock you might need based on different data feeds and things like that. So the real benefits and core opportunities, I think, for businesses today are, just switch to the next slide, there we go, there's 6 here. These are just some of my thoughts, but automate repetitive tasks, accelerate creative workflows for generating marketing copy, product images, social media content, reducing downtime costs if you're looking at predictive maintenance of assets, workflow optimizations and things. Personalized customer experiences. I think now more and more people are going to expect AI as a feature is going to be an expectation of customer experiences and on-demand information. So that's a big one. Improving data-driven decisions. So we have a lot of data now, and we can use this data to help inform how we're running our businesses and make good decisions based on it, and augment staff productivity. And in fact, some of the work that I've done for Luton AI, and some of the most powerful work has been going into organizations and doing an AI and data empowerment exercise and just giving staff the core tools to be able to speed up their everyday tasks using a suite of technology that we've approved and given clear usage guidance on. Things just to consider: currency of AI if you're on your adoption journey is data quality and access. Skills management is a really big one to consider. Legacy system integration. Some of you may have spent a lot of money on current systems. So how do you manage the AI movement and making sure you're not spending a lot of money and changing everything? One of the big things that comes up is, and I can only emphasize this, I can't emphasize this enough, sorry, is around return on investment. When you're developing your AI project, be really clear about, start small, don't jump into the middle of the ocean. Pick something where you're going to get a high payoff and that's low risk, and make sure you're clear about how you're going to evaluate success, and make sure you're clear about the return on investment and when you're going to evaluate that to see whether it's been successful or not. AI for AI's sake can be quite bad and can be quite expensive. So that one's having clear return on investment is important. And to start with, just to finish off before we go into the conversation, to summarize AI adoption in a roadmap to kind of help you in a one-stop kind of slide shop. The big thing is to choose the right problem. So as I said before, identify the task, the function, the pain points that you think AI is going to give you the biggest trade-off, perhaps in the lowest risk way initially. Define what good looks like before you actually go down and do it all. So you're clear about how you're going to evaluate the success of what you're doing. And then start by building a small pilot with a small team, perhaps ring-fenced off, and keep it focused on the one thing you're trying to do. And then evaluate the success based on that criteria and choose whether you want to scale or whether it's not worked or not. I'm going to finish there. If you want to hear more about the Luton AI work or anything, my email I'm sure can be shared afterwards. Like I said, it's not a money-making scheme. It's a civic-based organization designed to help people. Hence the conversation today. I hope that talk's given you some things to think about and hopefully some questions to ask in the conversation. So I can hand back to you, Ben, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for a very well pitched, very informative talk to everybody. If I was an AI bot, I could probably summarize it better than I will. However, you've given some coordinates as to what people can do next, should they wish. It's important that we get that out to everyone on this call so that if they wish to follow up, they can. You have mentioned transformers, large language models. You've talked about the impact of AI on businesses large and small and what people might do next. You've shown examples in avatars, in questions, in forming, in developing informative slides using AI, etc. There's a lot packed in there. And I would love to have a conversation with you on all sorts of things. And I am sure that it will go way beyond the sort of 25 minutes we have left now. We might be able to touch on a small number of my conversation points. However, before we do that, and before we also invite questions from everyone else on the call, and if you do have questions, please type them in the chat and we can keep an eye on those and get to as many as we can. Or stick your hand up in a few minutes, ask your question that way. Either way, it's really important that you guys get an opportunity to maybe make some points, ask some questions. We'd invite them to be, brief so that we can respond briefly and get through as many as possible. But before that, I will just invite a few comments from Henry and from Axel, and then we will come on to the Q&A. Henry.
Thanks, Ben. Just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm an engineering consultant with a kind of wide background across engineering software. I've worked for many years on control systems, and I'm also a director of Biztech. And I've got one comment from my experience. Years ago, we were building control systems for people, and the sort of a customer, the OEM, decided to put sort of off the shelf, sort of cheap as they could find PCs in the operator control desks, which seemed like a good idea at the time. But very rapidly, they found that they were spending a lot of time having to cope with these things keep changing. So they had to change all the instruction manuals and parts lists and mounting for the PCs just because they weren't stable. So what they ended up doing was buying industrial PCs, which were guaranteed to be available, including spares, for like 5 years to keep everything stable. So my worry is with the pace of change with AI, especially for SMEs, is how they cope with it, or what we can do, because the models keep changing, the tools keep improving, and the last thing an SME wants to do is develop some sort of workflow or whatever, and then find it's obsolete within months. So that's my comment.
Ed, would you like to respond briefly or otherwise?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, to be honest, that's a pretty much a comment that we get from a lot of organisations that we've been working with, and it's a bit of a minefield at the moment when you go out there and try and start negotiating the landscape. I think the big thing is when you're doing it is don't do AI for AI's sake. Don't just spend lots of money doing things that don't have a clear return on investment. It goes back to the point at the end of the presentation I was giving is, dip your toe in the water and slowly lower your body in with a very clear set of parameters and scope. So here are a few pain points within the organization. Let's have a look at the tools that might be able to help with those pain points. Or here is a feature that we think is going to bring value to our customers. Let's focus on a small pilot and implementation plan of how we can test whether it does bring that value and then scale afterwards. There is a lot going on at the moment, and you can spend a lot of money in organizations through software as a service and all of this. We actually had an organization we worked with recently who got a quote for an off-the-shelf AI product that was going to cost them in excess of £200,000 a year. We did an exercise with them to evaluate it before they went down the line, and actually there were cheaper alternatives, cut costs by nearly 75% because the functionality of the system they were looking at purchasing did all manner of different things. and actually they were not going to be using those, and it wasn't going to bring value, and there were different solutions for that. So sometimes making sure, and forums like this are really good, make connections, have conversations about different options. And we're really happy as an organization as well, if you're considering picking something up but don't really know where to start, to have a conversation with you. We don't charge for that, we just have a conversation and say, okay, this is something to look at, this is what you need to consider. So yeah.
Thank you, Ed, for a nice pragmatic response. Axel, would you like to?
I'd very much like to jump back in. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks, Ed. I'm Axel. I'm a consultant with over 25 years experience. I work for a company called Be Braver Online. For that is what I do, and I have done for over 25 years, which is help people, and mostly SMEs, be braver with the latest technology. And at the moment, funnily enough, I work a lot with AI, and I write on my blog about the risks of AI. So interesting to see Ed talk about the opportunities. I'm currently very much on the other side, where I'm looking at the risks. And as one of our participants, Peter, has just posted in the chat, there's a concern about leakage. There's a concern about reputational data. So picking up from what Ed said about picking something and having it sandboxed, especially with something like an agentic tool, like I mentioned in the beginning, OpenClaw, that runs on your computer, for God's sakes, if you pardon that, pardon me saying that, just sandbox it. So it is a very high risk. And if you've kept an eye on the news in the last few days, things happen rapidly. So they're happening much faster than people can write a risk assessment, let alone come up with a mitigation plan. So you got to be very pragmatic, and you got to plan these things out a lot more stringently than you would normally do on a software project. The other side is, and this is a bit of a passion of mine, privacy. And with that, the security aspect, data leakage, reputational damage are very high on the list. Phishing scams, just to kind of leave you with that idea, phishing scams have skyrocketed in effectiveness because they are so much easier now for even a completely tech illiterate person to just use a chatbot, have a prompt that they got off the darknet forum, and they can fashion phishing scam email that is targeted, it's timely, and it looks and feels and sounds exactly like your bank might do it or your business partner might do it. And then you're in a whole heap of trouble. If you want to know more, check out axelsegebrecht.com. I write as much as I can. Otherwise, I'm here for questions and answers too. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Freddie and Henry and Ed and Ben. So yeah, that's a comment I like to make into very, very timely topics.
Thank you, Axel. Would you like a brief response, Ed? And then we'll move on to some other questions.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is, I think, needs to be top of all companies' agendas at the moment. And the currency of any AI system is data, and that needs to be very carefully considered within the data that you're handling. I'm sure a lot of you will have data protection officers that can help inform on some of this. If you don't have that, it's really about looking at having a clear, whenever you're doing an AI pilot, having a really clear data governance strategy and data protection strategy when you're doing it. So, and you can see it as a very simple thing. What data is going into it? Where's that data being handled, stored, processed, and how? And how's the output coming out? And how's that going to be used, stored, and handled? And going through all of those steps, those 3 steps, and thinking about all of the dimensions of any risks that might be there. Is it really sensitive data? Have you got, if you're sending it into a large language model, for example, do you have a tenancy agreement whereby your data is going to be secure? If not, do you need to be thinking about having some sort of edge device on your network that means that you can have a layer of protection because it's not leaving your network, and you can have a local access to it? So all of those types of things need to be considered if you're doing any AI project that's dealing with sensitive data. I think there is an aspect as well around just generally around training the staff base, and an education piece around how you use these tools. So we had another example, and it was quite an ironic one, where we worked with a legal organization to go in and look at their AI policies and strategy. And they'd actually put the shutters down on using any tools. And what had happened was, and that was because of the sensitivity of the data, what we found in the exercises we ran was staff members were using their phones and their own personal accounts to use the tools. So sometimes putting the shutters down doesn't stop people. It's like that desired pathway. So having a clear company level message and actually empowering people to use the tools in a secure way, because the likelihood is people will be using them, is really important.
Thank you, Ed. Very briefly, I know that the question about data leakage came from Peter. Very briefly, Peter, would you like to make a final comment, or should we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I run sort of dev teams, and we're doing sort of transaction processing in secure areas, and we're looking at ways of using AI, and we're looking at firing off individual small projects, but we're working on like customer data, and which we don't want to leak, and also we don't want to lose IP, and it's trying to find a way to run these pilots in a controlled environment in-house, or as you say, use some edge servers to try and maintain a ring-fence solution. But what we don't know is, I come from a banking background, and a lot of people can download software that has encrypted tunnels built into it, and we don't know how good actors versus bad actors, and there's so many vendors out there at the moment. It's really difficult to know, and you almost need some assistance on vendor selection, so that you don't go down into this rabbit warren of your own staff downloading tools that they think are really good, and then the whole sort of cat is out of the bag kind of thing,
So got it. Thanks a lot, Peter. So there could be a lot to unpack in that final comment, and maybe that's a conversation you could follow up with Ed or someone else offline. There's a lot in that. And I think, Tom, have you been sat there with your hand up for a long time, or
he's been very patient with his virtual hand?
Would you like to ask your question?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Tom. I head up technology and digital agency called Makilo. If anything, actually, I should put that down. Peter's kind of covered a lot of my concerns. When I've been exploring interpretations of types of products, just been actually concerned about their data. I just wonder if, as a small comment to add to Peter's concern, is perhaps Ed or Ben, is there any starting points that you can point us at to start exploring what those potential good vendors might look like, even as a starting point? I've been, we've explored looking at, running models, advising clients to potentially run models locally using LM Studio or something like that, so that they're not, so they can kind of air gap that and not let their data leak. But again, you're pulling down models that you open up a bag, pull down models that you don't really, it's difficult to advise.
If I could ask Ed just for a very quick response, because I know time is flying.
Sure, yeah.
We want to try and get through some of these.
Quickly, in terms of doing things locally, we have implemented edge devices. So the NVIDIA DGX Spark's a really good example. Can probably service quite a large, 10, 20 people in terms of a large language model. And if you're worried about data security, you can download a model and have it stateless. So it doesn't do any training on top of that. So it is just a model and the data is completely gone, but you can have the output benefit of using it. If you're doing it on your network, you can just have the edge device that can only be accessed locally if you're worried about that, or via a VPN. If you're looking at vendors, it depends on the volume of the size of the relationship you're looking at. But vendors like Microsoft, Amazon Web Services have got some really good documentation and security benchmarks in place that are up to standard and should be secure enough for the work you're doing. But I would go to them and ask them to go through your problem. And at the moment, they're very happy to have conversations with organizations who are looking at using their services to give you a lowdown of what's in place.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So there's another potential follow-up offline on a similar topic. Okay, so I think that's the online questions.
Well, you have
yeah.
Pearl, I believe, Ben.
Pearl, oh, go for it. Yes, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Pearl, and my background is 22 years in tech, but I've spent the last 8 years working at Meta in quality assurance and software delivery. And right now, I'm focusing on helping people who are not technical, not from a tech background, but who are building software. And in my time of doing this, I noticed there's a huge rise on people using AI, low code, no code, to build tools. And there's some pretty good tools out there. However, if you don't know what you're doing, using AI to build comes at a cost. And lots of small businesses are using, some of these tools, and they're with huge risks that they're not aware of. And my question is, how can businesses be aware of risks, certain risks, before they take on the use of an AI tool, especially if they have no idea, whether the tool is safe or not, but they just know that they need it because it does things it solves problems for them. So how can they be more careful on what they choose?
Cool. Shall I?
Go for it.
That was the reason why we created Luton AI, actually. It'd be really interesting to maybe have a conversation with you, Pearl, how we could maybe work together, because we do that for no cost to organizations, just to help them in navigating the landscape. And it's a minefield. It's not easy. And we don't always have the right answers in the right moment because you don't have the full understanding of the particular use cases. For me, there's an education piece in this. So we've been doing workshops with businesses and with cybersecurity experts, with data analytics experts, along with kind of the more AI data scientists, to go through risks and unpick them in workshop form, in small group format, so we can all have a shared understanding of it. But I think for me, if you're not sure and you are handling sensitive information, it's seek advice. Don't do something that's going to cause your organization risk. You can get a lot of information, and I'm sure there's people using ChatGPT to ask that question: should I do this or not? But talk to someone who actually knows what they're talking about beforehand, I think is a key message. And like I said, that's why we created the organization, to support people in navigating that.
Thank you, Ed. All right. Well, look, Ed, I do have a little question for you about AI, but before that, it's just an obvious comment in a way, and that's with Biztech being based in Milton Keynes, and Alan Turing, to many people, is the father of AI, having worked in Bletchley Park. Then we do have a nice geographic link to the deep history there, which is just a comment to make, really, and kind of perhaps warming in a way. But we've mainly talked about large language models for this whole session, which is just one genre of AI, and they're known for using massive server farms, etc., etc. So if a small business was going to max out on the use of AI and large language models, etc., could we expect the energy bill of our small business to rise significantly and potentially kill a business case?
I mean, it's very, very nicely provocative to kind of end the rounding off of the conversation, I think. But so listen, I think we've all probably read news articles and things on some of the kind of climate challenges of the technology that we're using. I mean, a lot of the technology is very power hungry, and obviously we're just to give people a sense of the scale. Data center standards now for AI compute, you're looking at, ideally you want 500 megawatts of power in terms of connection. Heathrow uses about 50 megawatts on its most power hungry day. And if you think that's one of the largest pieces of infrastructure we have in the UK, it should give you a sense of how much power these things are using. I think I don't have in terms of a power bill, obviously if you're not doing it on premises, you're paying per token. But it is something to consider if you're having an on-premises solution, is having a look at the power requirements. And it's not just core power, it's actually cooling as well, which takes up a lot of energy. I think if you're implementing the technology, as long as you're doing it in an informed way with someone who can give you the expert input into making sure that while you're we're quite often focused on outputs, but focusing a bit on process when you're developing technology can keep your costs low. And I think, again, you probably will have all read some of the news on things like ChatGPT versus DeepSeek and how the model and technology has been developed in such a way that actually DeepSeek inferencing and the model development cost less in terms of power consumption than the OpenAI equivalent did. And that actually does run true on a lot of the technology if you're developing something from the ground up. So having a conversation with people who understand that might be able to point you in the right direction to keep your costs low.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So, there is a lot of good stuff in there, and I know that we're into the last few minutes, and I want to give the last couple of minutes to Freddie to round up. But just before we do that, to thank you for all of your questions and Ed for responses. The Royal Society of Great Britain, if you do a search on, for instance, on Google, for Royal Society of Great Britain, AI, artificial intelligence, they have published some reports on AI, which I would suggest are very well founded and solid. So please do follow up there. But also there's a follow up with the University of Bedfordshire, with Luton AI, etc., through Ed. And so I think it's important that that those contacts are well circulated to you guys. So I just want to thank Ed and thank you all, and hand over to Freddie for the last closing couple of minutes so we can have a timely end. Freddie.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Ed. Oh, I just want to say to everyone, as you say, thank you for all contributing today, for your openness, the insights that you've shared, and your willingness to engage and share with us. We don't want to just create another event. As I said before, we want to have this conversation and to challenge our assumptions and to share practical experience, which I think we've done today. And hopefully, I for one, have certainly having it influence some of my thinking about how we approach our AI projects in the future. I want to say that we're also trying to make this part of a series. So it's not just about a one-off conversation. After today, we're going to share the summary from today's conversation with you all. And then to let you know that we're already planning the next roundtable. If you have any thoughts about subjects, content, and potential speakers, do reach out to us, and we're really keen to work together to make sure that this is adding value and then it becomes sustainable. So we'll share the dates for the next roundtable in the coming weeks. By the end of February, we'll have those mapped out. And it just really to say, everybody, thank you for being on this journey with us on our very first roundtable. Have a great day, all of you.
Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media, and our website is biztech.org.uk. And subscribe to our newsletter to find out when the next talk is on.